Loofahs, loofahs, loofahs. This is completely biodegradable. When we tell people that we're growing loofahs, the first reaction people often say is they thought that was from the ocean. The second one would be, I thought that was a tropical plant.
So in this video, I'm going to show you how we turn this into this. This is a loofah, and you might think it comes from the ocean or is grown somewhere tropical, but no. It is a gourd, and I grew it here in Northern Ontario. Actually, I grew a lot of them in Northern Ontario. We start the loofah seeds in February, indoors, under lights. Loofahs require a long growing season, which we do not have here in Northern Ontario. To get around that, we transplant the loofahs in June in our greenhouse and hoop house. Our last frost can occur in June, and our first frost happens in September or sometimes even late August. So planting these loofahs in the greenhouse and hoop house will allow us to prolong the season. We planted 4 loofahs in the greenhouse and 1 in the middle of the hoop house. The loofahs really took off in the greenhouse.
We have loofahs growing all along the ceiling with lots of loofahs growing off of them. This is one of the small ones here. And we got some of the bigger ones there. And there, so hopefully we'll be able to grow these long enough that they can get big enough to have some nice loofahs out of it.
And by late September, they were massive, but still green. Around the same time in late September, we were expecting below freezing temperatures. So while we were covering all of our plants in the garden to protect them from frost, we decided to harvest all of the loofahs in the hoop house because it is not heated and we were not too sure how it would deal with those low temperatures. If you remember, these were started from seed in February. So around 8 months of growing time, and they are still green and likely could benefit from a longer growing season. So we will harvest the loofahs grown in the greenhouse much later to give them a chance to ripen up a little bit more.
Caddis, we're gonna go to the greenhouse, Caddis. We're gonna go pick some loofahs. Come on, let's go pick some loofahs. Winter is here, that is awesome. But what that means is an end to our harvest season, and especially for these loofahs. And we've left these loofahs going in here about as long as we think they can go. The leaves have started to die and go brittle. We're not getting much nutrients to the loofahs anymore, and leave them any longer, we're risking losing the entire crop. We started these seeds really early on in the winter, as early as February, January, and then transplanted them into the greenhouse to grow all summer long. They reached higher temperatures in here than they would have reached outside. And we were able to extend both the beginning and the end of the season. Look at them, they're still growing, and there is obviously a blizzard going on outside. When we tell people that we're growing loofahs, the first reaction people often say is they thought that was from the ocean. The second one would be, I thought that was a tropical plant. That's where the magic of a greenhouse comes in. Now that is a nice haul of loofahs. That's almost a whole Rubbermaid. Now it's time to process all these green loofahs into sponges. The first step is to peel all the skin off of it. After watching a few videos about processing green loofahs, I was a little worried about how difficult this might be, smashing them on the ground, getting loofah juices and shrapnel everywhere, but that is actually not as hard as it looks. I kind of just squeeze it to break it apart, and then you can peel off the skin. You can notice there's a lot of stuff inside, and that is because these are green. Some of the ones that are further along, they'll have less interstitial spaces filled up. This one started going a little bit bad here. So there's going to be a little bit of coloration there, not pure white. A little bit of a trade-off, letting them ripe enough or letting them ripen too much. Okay, now that first step is done on this, and I'm going to move on to the next. Now this one, much smaller, and it's actually super light. So I have a feeling that this one will not have as much of the stuff filling in the cracks here. We only planted one kind of loofah, but we do seem to be getting 2 different, very different looking ones. So the first one was like a darker green and much bigger, and then the second, which is a lighter green and much smaller.
So it is a lot less dense here. Now this one is much drier and it is much lighter, so it is probably a lot closer to being ripe than these other ones. So I have a feeling that this is gonna peel off a lot easier. And yes, the skin's coming off like all in one big chunk rather than pieces. So this is one of the reasons why people like to do them when they're a little bit more ripe. This one looks beautiful. And you can already see it's full of seeds. I thought I'd show the difference between two loofahs that are two different stages of maturity. So this one still has a lot of juice and material between the fibers, and this one is almost completely empty already. And the seeds are quite dark versus, there's so much stuff in here, you can't even, versus this one where the seeds are white.
Even though there's a difference between these loofahs, some of them with more gunk than others, all of them are ripe enough to provide us with a sponge. That was not the case when we harvested the loofahs from the hoop house. Remember, we did that much earlier at the end of September to avoid the frost. When we did that, several loofahs did not provide us with any sort of spongy material and were nowhere near ready to be harvested. That being said, we did have some loofahs from September that did provide us with sponges, very much like these ones here that have more of the gunk and the white seeds.
The next step then is to get all that gunky stuff out from between the fibrous layers and to get the seeds out. I will be saving these. Okay, the next step is to get all the gunk off of the sponge, this fibrous material, and to get all the seeds out. So this is one of the riper ones, so I'm doing them first because I want to save the seeds separately because they might have more chance of actually being viable. And so to do that, I just kind of bang it on the side of the sink. You're gonna get, again, shrapnel, you're gonna get seeds flying everywhere. But as you can see here, there's two different colors of seeds here. I'm gonna try to save the black ones from the most mature loofahs that we had separately, and just in general, try to save the black seeds. Now this first one, I'm gonna do the second one before I forget, and then save these separately from the rest. The next step is just use your sink and just squeeze and rinse out all that gunk from between the fibrous layers. You're gonna find more seeds while doing that. Just make sure you collect them. You wanna have your strainer in here so the seeds aren't all going down your sink drain either. And you can be pretty rough when doing this. It's not gonna rip. You really wanna squeeze as much as that gunk out of there. So now these two were a little bit further along in ripeness than the other ones, so they didn't have as much gunk. Compare that to this one, which is just full of gunk. You see at the top here, there's even like solid pieces of the gourd that you can just pick out with your hand. And the seeds, look at all that juicy stuff. And the seeds are much whiter because we are picking these green, so I don't have a lot of hope actually that any of these will be viable, but I am holding out some hope. Later on in the video, we'll do a germination test to see which seeds are viable and which aren't, or if any of them are viable at all. Because as I said, these are unripe. They're not fully ripe, but hopefully the ones from the ripest ones will.
2 hours and 26 loofahs later, I have rinsed out almost all of the gunk and the seeds, and they're ready to be hung to dry. The wood stove is roaring. That means we have nice dry heat, so we're going to hang these behind this wood stove, get them dried up and ready to go really, really quickly.
Another way to dry these, if you do not have space to hang them all, is to put them in the dehydrator. They don't need to be hung. They can just lay on the dehydrating tray. Give them some room to breathe. And dry it at the lowest setting.
And the loofahs are done. Both methods worked. The air drying behind the wood stove as well as the dehydrator. And we have some great texture in these loofahs. This is one of the bigger ones. In the dehydrator, set to the lowest setting, it only took overnight and they were done. The ones hanging behind the wood stove only took about 3 days. So this part of the process is actually quite simple. This one is one of the bigger ones, and I'd say one of my favorite loofahs. Look at it. and they are ready to be used just like this. Typically, you wouldn't use a full loofah though. You break it up into pieces, kind of like this. These loofahs have so many uses. We have one in the shower for each of us and one in the sink at all times. The fibers are really, really good at scrubbing. In fact, so much better than the sponge and none of the microplastics. This is completely biodegradable. We also open some of these up to be flat and cut it up into smaller pieces like this. And this is very much like a scrubby dishcloth. We also have one of these at our sink at all times. So these are the different colors of seeds we got from the loofahs, these lighter, whiter colored seeds and these darker black seeds. The riper loofahs had a lot more of these black seeds. The ones that weren't quite as ripe were full of these lighter colored seeds. And now we're going to do a germination test of the different colors. These have been going for about a week and a half, so it takes quite a while for these guys to germinate. But as you will see, we have 10 seeds of each color, and none of the white seeds germinated, and 2 so far of the black seeds have germinated. So we have about a 20% success rate with the black seeds and a 0% success rate with the white seeds. So if you're looking for something fun to add to your garden this year, why not loofahs? They're super fun, but remember it's a very long growing season. Start them really early, and if possible, put them somewhere covered and or heated to get the best and the most sponges out of it. Enjoy! And dry it at the lowest setting.